The worst secrets are not shouted across a room. They ring softly during dinner, while the person you trust most reaches for the phone like his whole life depends on stopping it. Claire Bennett had spent 3 hours trying to make their third wedding anniversary feel special on a grocery budget that barely stretched past Friday. The chicken was from the discount bin, the candles were the same vanilla ones she had saved from last Christmas, and the little cake in the center of the table had a red clearance sticker still stuck to the bottom of the plastic tray. But she had set the table anyway. 2 plates, 2 cloth napkins, 1 chipped vase with 5 white daisies from the flower shop where she worked part-time. Outside their small rented house in Cedar Falls, Ohio, October rain tapped against the windows, steady and cold, blurring the porch light into a soft yellow halo. Inside, the kitchen smelled like rosemary, butter, and something close to hope. Claire kept glancing at the clock above the stove. 7:15. 7:30. 7:42. Daniel had promised he would be home by 7. He had said his boss might keep him late at the warehouse, but he would try. He always said he would try. That had become the rhythm of their marriage. Daniel trying. Claire waiting. Bills stacking up beside the toaster. Love stretched thin but still there, still breathing. When his old pickup finally rolled into the driveway, Claire heard the engine cough before she saw the headlights sweep across the curtains. Daniel stepped in carrying the cold with him, his dark blonde hair damp from the rain, his gray work jacket zipped to his throat, his face wearing that tired smile she had fallen in love with before she understood how heavy tired could become. "I am sorry," he said, setting his keys near the door. Inventory ran long. Claire looked at his hands. Clean. Too clean for a man who claimed he had been moving freight all evening. She pushed the thought away because marriage, she had learned, sometimes meant choosing not to chase every small doubt. "Sit down before it gets cold," she said softly. Daniel kissed her cheek, but his lips barely touched her skin. His eyes moved to the table, then to the cake, and something like guilt passed over his face. "You did all this? It is our anniversary." He swallowed. "Claire, do not say we cannot afford it," she said, forcing a smile. The cake was $6. Technically $5.99, so still responsible. He laughed, but it broke halfway through. For a few minutes they tried to be normal. Forks touched plates. Rain whispered against the glass. Claire told him about a woman who had ordered funeral lilies by mistake for a baby shower, and Daniel smiled in the right places, nodded in the right places, but his mind was somewhere else. Then his phone buzzed on the table. Not once. Again. Again. The screen lit up between them like a match struck in a dark room. Claire saw the name before Daniel grabbed for it. Margaret Hale. Boss. Daniel's face changed so fast that Claire forgot how to breathe. "I need to take this outside," he said. "Why?" "It is work." "During dinner?" His fingers closed around the phone, but a smear of sauce on his thumb made it slip. It landed face up near Claire's plate, still ringing. She picked it up without thinking, half annoyed, half tired of being the wife who never asked questions. "Margaret, he is eating dinner with his wife," Claire said, tapping the speaker button before Daniel could stop her. For 1 second, there was only the sound of rain and Daniel's sharp breath. Then a woman's voice filled the kitchen, calm, expensive, and colder than the weather outside. "Daniel, your wife has 10 minutes to sign the spousal disclosure, or the board will remove you as CEO tonight." The silence that followed was so complete Claire could hear the candle flame flicker. Daniel did not move. He only stared at the phone, as if one sentence had just opened a locked door he had spent years standing in front of. Claire slowly lowered the fork in her hand. Ew. Board. Spousal disclosure. Words that did not belong in their cracked tile kitchen, beside unpaid utility bills and a $6 anniversary cake. She looked at her husband's work jacket, the muddy boots by the door, the cheap watch he always wore, the man who had told her they were barely getting by. Then she looked at the phone again. "Daniel," she whispered, and her voice did not sound angry yet. It sounded worse. It sounded wounded. What is she talking about? Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. And in that breathless little kitchen, Claire Bennett realized the man sitting across from her had not just kept a secret. He had built an entire life around one. Daniel reached for the phone first, but Claire was faster. Not because she wanted control, not because she had planned to catch him, but because some part of her understood that if he touched it, the truth might disappear again. The woman on the line said his name once more, sharper this time. Daniel? Are you there? Claire stared at him across the table. The candlelight made his face look unfamiliar, carving shadows beneath his eyes, turning the man she had married into someone she was seeing for the first time. Margaret, Daniel said at last, his voice low. Not now. There is no not now, the woman replied. Vivian has already called an emergency vote. Legal needs Claire's signature before 8:15. Or the board will assume your marital disclosure was intentionally withheld. Claire's hand tightened around the phone. Who is Vivian? Daniel closed his eyes. That small movement frightened her more than an argument would have. It was the face of a man who was not confused, not surprised, not falsely accused. He knew exactly what was happening. My cousin, he said. And the disclosure? Claire asked. The kitchen clock ticked behind them. Water dripped from Daniel's jacket onto the floor in tiny dark spots. He looked down at the anniversary cake as if the answer might be written in the frosting. It is a company document. Claire gave a short, breathless laugh, but there was no humor in it. The company where you load boxes for $14 an hour? Margaret went silent on the line. Daniel reached for the phone again, slower this time. Claire pulled it back. No, she said. She started this conversation in my kitchen. She can finish it. A pause. Then Margaret spoke softer now. Mrs. Bennet, I am sorry you found out this way. Found out. Two simple words, and suddenly every small odd thing in Claire's marriage rose around her like dust in a sunbeam. Daniel coming home with no warehouse smell on his clothes. Daniel taking calls in the driveway with the truck radio turned on to cover his voice. Daniel knowing exactly which bank owned their rental house, even though he claimed he had only spoken with the landlord once. Daniel refusing to let her come to his workplace because, he said, the loading docks were not safe for visitors. She remembered the winter their heater died. How she slept in 2 sweaters while he promised the repairman would wait until payday. She remembered selling her mother's pearl earrings to cover what Daniel called an old medical bill. She remembered the empty jar on the counter, the one that used to hold money for her art classes, emptied again and again for emergencies he never fully explained. What am I supposed to have found out? Claire asked. Daniel whispered her name, but she did not look at him. Margaret exhaled. Your husband is Daniel Bennet, Chief Executive Officer of Bennet Logistics Group. Claire almost smiled because the sentence was too large to fit inside the room. Bennet Logistics. She had seen the name on semi-trucks passing along Interstate 71, on office buildings downtown, on a news segment about a merger worth millions of dollars. That Bennet. Her Daniel who clipped coupons and wore work boots with split soles, was that Daniel. She placed the phone on the table as carefully as if it were glass. Hang up, she said. Margaret began. Mrs. Bennet, the board? Hang up, Claire repeated, and this time Daniel ended the call. The screen went black. For several seconds neither of them moved. Then Claire stood and walked to the sink, not because she needed water, but because her legs were shaking and she did not want him to see. The rain kept tapping the window, gentle and ordinary, as if the world outside had no idea hers had just cracked open. How long? She asked. Daniel's answer came barely above a whisper. Since before we met. Claire turned slowly. Before we met, she repeated. So when you told me you were an assistant shift manager at the warehouse, I was trying to keep my real life separate. Your real life. The words hit harder than she expected. Then what was this, Daniel? What was I? He stepped toward her and she stepped back. That stopped him. His face tightened. You were the only real thing in it. Claire shook her head. Do not make that sound beautiful. Her voice broke, but she held it steady with both hands pressed against the edge of the sink. You let me worry about rent. You let me skip dental work. You let me apologize for not making enough money at the flower shop. You watched me count quarters for gas. Daniel swallowed. I wanted to tell you. But you did not. He looked away and that was the answer. Claire glanced at the table, at the cooling food, at the cake she had been proud of 10 minutes earlier. The little clearance sticker on the tray suddenly felt humiliating. Not because it was cheap, but because she had believed they were surviving together. She had believed hardship was something they were holding from opposite sides. Now she understood he had been watching her carry weight he could have lifted at any time. "I need you to explain," she said quietly. "And Daniel, for once in our marriage, do not give me the version you think I can handle." Daniel stood beside the table as if the floor beneath him had become unfamiliar. The phone lay black and silent between the plates, but the damage had already escaped it. Claire waited, her hand still gripping the sink, her reflection trembling faintly in the dark kitchen window. Daniel took a breath, then another, like he was trying to choose which truth would hurt the least. "My father built Bennett Logistics from one delivery truck," he said. "By the time I was 25, it had become one of the largest private shipping companies in the Midwest. When he died, I inherited his shares, his office, his enemies, and a warning." Claire did not move. "What warning?" Daniel looked at her then, and for the first time that night, his eyes were not guarded. They were ashamed. "He told me money changes the way people look at you. He said some people will love the name, not the man. He married my mother for love, but before that there was someone else. Someone who nearly took half the company and left him convinced that trust was dangerous." Claire felt something twist in her chest, but she kept her voice quiet. "So you decided to test me?" Daniel flinched. "At first, I just wanted one date where nobody knew. I met you at that community fundraiser in Dayton. You were arranging donated flowers in coffee cans because the budget had been cut. You had dirt on your cheek, and you were arguing with a city councilman because he wanted to cancel the children's art tables. You did not know who I was. You did not care what watch I wore. You looked me straight in the eye and told me if powerful people were too busy to help ordinary families, they should at least stop getting in the way." A memory passed through Claire like warm light through an old curtain. She remembered that night. Daniel had introduced himself as Dan, a warehouse supervisor passing through. He had carried folding chairs for an hour without being asked. He had made her laugh by drawing a terrible flower on a paper napkin. She had thought he was humble. She had thought he was kind. "And you liked that I had no idea," she said. Daniel nodded once. "I loved it." The word landed too softly to repair anything. Claire turned back toward the table, toward their life laid out in cheap plates and cooling food. "You loved being safe from me." "No," he said quickly. "I loved being seen." "Then why did you keep hiding after we got married?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "Because every month it got harder. Because the board was watching me. Because Vivian kept pushing for a merger I did not trust. Because if anyone found out I had married without disclosure, they could use it against me. I told myself I was protecting you from my world." Claire opened the drawer by the stove, took out the little glass jar, and set it on the table. It was almost empty now. A few quarters, 2 dimes, and a folded note in her own handwriting that said, "Art Room Fund." Daniel stared at it like it was an accusation because it was. "Do you remember this?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "Yes. I started it after our honeymoon. I wanted to rent that old storefront on Maple Street and teach weekend painting classes. $20 a month, maybe 30 when tips were good. Then your emergencies kept coming." Daniel closed his eyes. "Claire. The transmission. The medical bill. The debt from your mother's estate. The warehouse strike that supposedly cut your hours." She pushed the jar toward him. The coins clicked against the glass, small and sharp. Were any of them real? Daniel did not answer fast enough. Claire laughed once, a broken sound she immediately hated. "You let me empty my dream 1/4 at a time. I paid it back," he said, then stopped, realizing how terrible it sounded. Claire's face went still. "Where?" He looked toward the hallway, toward the coat rack where his gray work jacket hung dripping over the mat. Claire followed his gaze and walked to it before he could speak. She searched the pockets with shaking hands and found only a receipt, a folded gas station napkin, and then something heavy tucked deep inside the lining. A key. Not brass. Not cheap. Smooth, gold-toned metal with engraved letters catching the kitchen light. Bennett Tower. Private residence. Claire held it up between them. For a moment, neither of them breathed. She thought of the winter heater, the skipped dentist appointment, the nights she had eaten toast and told him she was not hungry. She thought of him carrying this key while she apologized to a landlord for being late on rent. You had a home, she whispered. Daniel's face paled. It is not a home. Claire looked at the key, then at him. No. It was a door. And every day, you chose which side of it I belonged on. Claire did not sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table long after the food had gone cold, long after Daniel stopped trying to explain and simply stood there with the face of a man watching every excuse fail. The golden key lay between them beside the empty art jar, shining under the weak ceiling light like it did not belong in a house with peeling paint near the back door, and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly after midnight. Daniel offered to leave. Claire told him to stay in the guest room. They did not have a real guest room, only the small space behind the laundry area where they kept storage boxes and an old futon. But he nodded as if she had given him more mercy than he deserved. By morning the rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and gray. Claire stood by the stove in the same sweater from the night before, making coffee she did not want, when a black Lincoln pulled up outside their little rental house. It looked absurd against the cracked curb and wet maple leaves, too polished, too quiet, like something from a different version of America had taken a wrong turn into her life. Daniel came out of the hallway before the knock sounded. His hair was uncombed. His face looked older in daylight. That is Margaret, he said. Claire poured coffee into a chipped mug. Of course it is. The knock came anyway, 3 calm taps. Daniel moved toward the door, but Claire lifted a hand. No. I will open it. Margaret Hale stood on the porch in a navy coat, silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head, leather gloves in one hand, the other holding a slim folder against her chest. She was in her 60s, maybe older, with the kind of posture that made a front porch feel like a boardroom. Her eyes went first to Claire, then past her to Daniel, and something unreadable crossed her face. Mrs. Bennet, she said. I owe you an apology. Claire almost laughed. That seems to be popular this week. Margaret accepted the sentence without blinking. May I come in? Claire stepped aside. Margaret entered carefully, not with disgust, not with pity, but with attention. She noticed the daisies, the cake still untouched, the golden key, the empty glass jar. Claire saw her see everything. Daniel's voice was rough. Margaret, this is not the time. The time was 3 years ago, Margaret said, turning to him. You made certain we lost that. Daniel looked away. Claire set her mug down. Why are you here? Margaret placed the folder on the table. Because Vivian Cross has called an emergency board session for noon. She claims Daniel concealed a legal spouse from corporate disclosure records, which creates vulnerability in the merger review. If the board votes against him, he will be removed as chief executive officer before the day ends. Claire stared at the folder but did not touch it. And you need me to save him. I need you to tell the truth. No, Claire said quietly. You need me to sign something that makes his lie easier to digest. Margaret's expression softened, but only slightly. The document states that you were aware of Daniel's position before the marriage and chose privacy for personal reasons. Daniel stepped forward. I told them not to bring that. Claire turned on him. So it is a lie. His silence answered. Claire looked back at Margaret. You came to my house after what happened last night, to ask me to lie for the man who lied to me. Margaret did not defend herself. I came because if Vivian takes control, thousands of employees may pay the price. Drivers, dispatchers, warehouse teams, families who have nothing to do with this marriage. That landed. Claire hated that it landed. She thought of the people behind every company logo, the ordinary names under the corporate headlines. Still, her hand stayed at her side. Margaret opened the folder. Inside was a document with Claire's full legal name printed beneath Daniel's. Seeing it there made her feel strangely exposed, as if a life she had not agreed to had been written around her. There is a car waiting, Margaret said. If you sign at Bennett Tower, legal can file before the vote. Claire looked toward the window. The Lincoln waited in the driveway, engine running silently. Bennett Tower. The words on the key. The door she had never been allowed to walk through. Daniel spoke softly. Claire, please. Come with me. Let me show you everything. She looked at him, then really looked. Beneath the shame, beneath the panic, there was hope, and that almost hurt most of all. He still thought the truth could be presented like a room she might admire. Claire picked up the golden key and closed her fingers around it. I will come, she said. Daniel's shoulders eased. Then she added, but I am not signing anything until I know exactly what kind of life my husband has been living without me. The drive to Bennett Tower took 26 minutes, but to Claire it felt like crossing from one life into another. The Lincoln moved smoothly through downtown Columbus, past coffee shops, glass storefronts, and office workers carrying paper cups under a pale morning sky. Daniel sat beside her, close enough that their sleeves almost touched, but neither of them reached across the space. Margaret sat in the front passenger seat, speaking quietly into her phone, using words Claire had only heard on business news. Shareholder confidence, merger leverage, emergency resolution. Claire looked down at the golden key in her palm. It was warm now from her grip, its engraved letters pressing faint half-moons into her skin. Bennett Tower rose near the river, 40 stories of blue glass and steel, with the company name mounted above the entrance in letters taller than she was. Trucks with the Bennett logo moved along the street below, the same logo she had passed 100 times without knowing it was tied to the man who slept beside her. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished stone, fresh flowers and expensive coffee. People turned when Daniel walked in. Not casually. Not the way people glance at a stranger. They straightened. They parted. Some said, "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," with careful respect. Others looked at Claire then away too quickly. She felt her discount store sweater, her old jeans, the rain mark still dried near the hem of her coat. Daniel noticed. "Claire," he said softly, "you belong here." She did not look at him. "Do not decide that for me." Margaret led them to a private elevator that opened only after Daniel pressed his thumb against a small black panel. The doors closed and Claire watched the floor numbers rise. 32, 33, 34. Her stomach tightened with each soft chime. When the doors opened, she saw the private residence Daniel had never mentioned. It was not flashy in the way she expected. No gold statues. No ridiculous chandeliers. That almost made it worse. It was beautiful, quiet, lived in and unlived in at the same time. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. A cream sofa faced a fireplace that had never warmed her. Shelves held books Daniel had probably read while telling her he was working late. On the kitchen counter sat a coffee mug from the same little diner where they had gone on their first date. Claire walked to it slowly. "You came here after telling me you had overnight shifts?" Daniel's voice was strained. "Sometimes." She nodded as if the word had weight. Sometimes he had stood in this room above the city while she folded laundry in a cold house and wondered if they could afford new tires. Sometimes he had slept in a king-size bed while she left a lamp on because the old furnace made strange sounds. Sometimes he had been rich and tired while she had been poor and afraid. Her eyes moved to a framed photograph on the side table. Daniel, Margaret, and a younger woman with sharp red hair stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The woman's smile was perfect, but her eyes looked like they were measuring the room. "Vivian," Margaret said from behind her. Claire turned. "The cousin." Daniel nodded. "She owns a minority stake. She has wanted control since my father died." Before Claire could respond, Margaret's phone buzzed. She read the message and her face hardened. "It is already public." Daniel stepped toward her. "What is public?" Margaret held out the phone. Claire saw the headline first, then her own name. CEO hid fortune from wife while living as working-class husband. Beneath it was a photograph of their rental house, the chipped porch railing visible, the daisies still in the window. Claire's body went cold. How did they get that? Margaret's jaw tightened. "Vivian." Daniel took the phone, anger flashing across his face, but Claire barely saw him. She saw the comments starting to pile up under the article. People laughing at the house. People calling her naive. People calling her a gold digger before she had even touched a dime. Her private humiliation had become public entertainment. Daniel reached for her hand. "I will fix this." Claire pulled away. "With what? A statement? A lawyer? A nicer house so everyone can stop feeling sorry for me? That is not what I meant." "That is always what you mean," she said, her voice shaking now. "You think money is an eraser." Margaret stepped closer. "Mrs. Bennett, the board meets in less than 2 hours." Claire looked from Margaret to Daniel, then to the skyline beyond the glass. From up here, the city looked small enough to manage. Maybe that was why powerful people forgot what life felt like on the ground. I will go to your boardroom, Claire said. I will listen. But I will not be used as a signature, a wife, or a piece of damage control. Daniel's face fell, not because she was cruel, but because she was finally clear. Claire placed the golden key on the marble counter between them. It made a small clean sound. And until you understand the difference between protecting me and controlling what I know, do not ask me to stand beside you. The boardroom at Bennett Tower was colder than the rest of the building, not in temperature but in feeling. It sat behind double walnut doors on the 39th floor, with a table long enough to make every conversation feel like a trial and windows so clear the city seemed to hang below them like a map. Claire walked in behind Margaret, with Daniel a few steps back, and every face turned toward her. 12 people in tailored suits looked at the woman from the news article, the wife in the discount sweater, the secret that had become inconvenient. At the far end of the table sat Vivian Cross. In person, she was even smoother than the photograph Claire had seen upstairs. Red hair swept over one shoulder, pearl earrings, cream blazer, a smile polished enough to look harmless from a distance. Claire, Vivian said, standing as if they were old friends. I am so sorry you were dragged into this. Claire did not answer. She noticed the folder in front of Vivian, thick with color tabs. She noticed the presentation screen already glowing behind her. She noticed Daniel's name at the top of a slide beside the words leadership instability and disclosure failure. Margaret took her seat, but Claire remained standing. Daniel moved toward the head chair, then stopped, as if he no longer knew whether he had earned it. Vivian saw the hesitation and smiled a little wider. Before we begin, she said to the room, I want to acknowledge Mrs. Bennett's difficult position. No spouse should discover from the press that her marriage has been used to conceal material information. The words were gentle. The blade was hidden. Claire felt every director watching to see if she would cry, shout, or collapse into the role Vivian had prepared for her. Instead, she pulled out the chair nearest the door and sat down quietly. Vivian continued, clicking to the next slide. Images appeared on the screen. Claire's house. Daniel's old pickup. The flower shop where Claire worked. A grainy photograph of Claire carrying grocery bags across a parking lot. Heat rose up her neck, not from shame, but from the cruelty of making an ordinary life look like evidence. Vivian turned toward Daniel. This is not privacy. This is deception. A chief executive officer who performs poverty for his own wife cannot be trusted with a merger of this scale. A few board members murmured. Daniel's jaw tightened. Claire looked at him, expecting him to defend himself with the full force of his name, his lawyers, his money. But he only stared at the screen, pale and silent, as if seeing their life displayed like that had finally shown him what his lie looked like from the outside. Then Vivian placed a second folder on the table. For the protection of Bennett Logistics, I propose immediate removal of Daniel Bennett as Chief Executive Officer and approval of the revised merger package under interim family oversight. Margaret leaned forward. That package has not completed employee impact review. Vivian's smile did not move. The company cannot afford delay. Something in that sentence caught Claire. Not the business language. The urgency. The way Vivian slid past the workers as if they were numbers under a column. Claire looked at the folder nearest her. On the cover was a logo for the acquiring firm and a list of attachments. She saw one tab labeled Labor Optimization Plan. Another labeled Asset Realignment. Words that sounded clean enough to hide pain. Claire reached for the folder. A man beside her cleared his throat. Mrs. Bennett, those documents are confidential. Claire looked at him. So was my marriage, apparently. The room went quiet. She opened the folder. Daniel whispered, Claire. She did not stop. Her eyes moved down the pages, not understanding every legal phrase, but understanding enough. Distribution centers closed in Dayton, Toledo, and Akron. Route consolidation. Workforce reduction. Severance limitations. She saw numbers beside cities she knew. She saw lives turned into percentages. Suddenly Margaret's warning made sense. Vivian was not just trying to remove Daniel. She was using his lie as smoke to push through something much larger. Claire looked up slowly. How many employees lose their jobs under this plan? Vivian's expression tightened for the first time. That is not the issue being discussed. It is the issue you are trying not to discuss. A board member leaned back. Another reached for his copy of the folder. Claire stood, holding the pages in both hands. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. My husband lied to me. I will not defend that. He let me live with fear I did not need to carry, and that is something he will answer for at home, not in a press release. Daniel lowered his eyes. Claire turned toward Vivian. But you brought pictures of my house into this room to embarrass me. You used my grocery bags, my job, my front porch like being ordinary was proof of weakness. And while everyone was looking at my life, you were asking them to sign away other people's lives. Vivian's smile disappeared. Claire placed the golden key on the table. The sound was small, but everyone heard it. This is what he hid from me. But that folder is what you were hiding from them. She looked at the board, one face at a time. If this company is going to decide who deserves trust, maybe start with the person who wanted the truth buried under a scandal. For the first time since Claire had entered Bennett Tower, Daniel looked at her not like a man begging to be saved, but like a man finally understanding the woman he had underestimated. For a few seconds, no one in the boardroom spoke. The city shimmered beyond the glass, traffic moving silently 40 stories below, while the people around the table stared at the folder in Claire's hands as if the pages had changed shape. Vivian recovered first. She gave a small, controlled laugh and folded her hands in front of her. This is emotional theater, she said. Mrs. Bennett is understandably upset, but she has no corporate authority here. Claire felt the words land, but they did not move her. After everything that morning, after the phone call, the key, the article, the photographs of her ordinary life displayed for strangers, she had become strangely calm. Sometimes a heart could only break so far before it stopped trembling. Margaret looked at the directors. She may not have corporate authority, but she has raised a valid concern. The revised merger package must be reviewed before any vote. Reviewed by whom? Vivian snapped, the polish cracking at the edges. By the same legal team Daniel kept in the dark about his own marriage? Daniel finally stood. His chair moved back with a soft scrape, and every eye shifted to him. For years, Claire imagined him tired because he carried boxes, drove routes, answered to someone else. Now she saw a different kind of exhaustion in him, the kind that came from carrying a crown he had never learned how to wear without hiding. He looked first at Vivian, then at the board, and only then at Claire. My cousin is right about one thing, he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. I created this vulnerability. Vivian's mouth curved, almost triumphant. Daniel continued. I married Claire and concealed the truth from her. I told myself it was privacy, then protection, then timing. But those were names I gave to fear because fear sounded too small for a man in my position. Claire held the folder against her chest. Daniel did not look away from her now. I let my father's pain become my rulebook. I believed that if Claire knew who I was, I would never know whether she loved me or the life I could give her. So I gave her a smaller life and called it honesty. I watched her sacrifice. I watched her worry. And every time I stayed silent, I chose control over trust. The boardroom had gone completely still. Even Vivian did not interrupt. Daniel turned back to the table. That failure is mine. Not hers. Not the employees. Not the company's. Mine. He picked up the merger packet and flipped to the labor plan Claire had exposed. But I will not allow my failure as a husband to become a doorway for another failure as chief executive officer. Bennett Logistics was built by drivers who missed dinners, dispatchers who answered phones before sunrise, warehouse teams who kept routes moving through Ohio winters and summer storms. They are not optimization targets. They are families. Margaret's eyes softened, just enough for Claire to notice. Daniel placed the packet on the table. I am requesting the board suspend today's vote, appoint Margaret Hale as interim oversight chair for an independent review, and remove Vivian Cross from merger negotiations pending investigation into the unauthorized media leak and disclosure manipulation. Vivian stood so quickly her chair bumped the wall behind her. You cannot do that to me. Daniel looked at her with no anger now, only a sadness that seemed older than the room. I can stop pretending loyalty is the same as trust. A director near the window spoke first. Motion to suspend the vote. Another followed. Second. Vivian looked around, searching for the support she thought was already hers, but one by one, the faces at the table turned away from her. The vote happened quickly. Too quickly for the size of what it changed. The merger was paused. The review was approved. Vivian's authority was frozen until legal completed its work. When it was over, Daniel did not smile. He removed the expensive watch from his wrist, the one Claire had glimpsed the night before and mistaken for another loose thread in a confusing marriage. He set it beside the golden key. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his old wedding band, the simple scratched ring he had stopped wearing at work because, he once told Claire, machinery made it unsafe. He slid it onto his finger in front of everyone. "There is one more thing," he said. "Effective immediately. I am taking a leave from my executive duties for 6 months. Margaret will oversee operations with the board's approval. I will cooperate with the review, and I will issue a public statement taking responsibility for my deception without using my wife as an explanation." Claire's breath caught. She had expected defense, strategy, a better lie dressed as sacrifice. She had not expected him to step away from the throne he had protected for so long. Daniel looked at her, and this time there was no performance in his face, no plea for rescue. "Claire deserves the truth without an audience," he said. "And I need to learn how to be a man who can give it to her." The room blurred slightly, not from tears exactly, but from the sudden ache of seeing someone choose the harder road too late, yet maybe not too late forever. Claire did not forgive him in that moment. Forgiveness was not a switch, and love was not a board vote. But as Daniel walked away from the head of the table and left the golden key behind, she understood something important. For the first time since the phone rang, he was not asking her to enter his hidden life. He was finally stepping out of it. Daniel did not ride back to the little rental house in the Lincoln. He asked Margaret to have the car take Claire home, then handed his phone, his building pass, and the golden key to Margaret before walking alone toward the elevator with only his wedding ring on his hand and the weight of what he had done on his shoulders. Claire watched him go through the glass wall of the executive floor, past employees who stopped pretending not to stare, past framed photographs of ribbon cuttings and awards, past a version of himself that no longer seemed to fit. She expected to feel satisfied, maybe even relieved. Instead, she felt hollow, as if the truth had emptied the room but had not yet filled it with anything better. The ride home was silent. Margaret sat beside her this time instead of in front, but she did not offer excuses for Daniel. That helped more than Claire wanted to admit. When the Lincoln pulled up beside the cracked curb, their rental house looked smaller than it had that morning, but also strangely honest. The porch still leaned a little. The mailbox still had a dent. The daisies still sat in the window, stubborn and white. Claire thanked Margaret without looking at her and went inside alone. The kitchen still smelled faintly of rosemary and cold coffee. The cake had slumped under its plastic lid. The glass jar sat where she had left it. A few coins at the bottom, the folded art room fund note pressed against the side. Claire picked it up and held it to her chest. For the first time all day she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just the quiet kind of crying that comes when a person realizes she has been brave for too many hours and there is finally no one left to perform strength for. Near dusk, Daniel came home on foot. Claire saw him through the window before he reached the porch. His gray work jacket was zipped against the cold. No driver. No assistant. No polished shield around him. He knocked even though he had a key. Claire stood on the other side of the door for a long moment, listening to him breathe in the chilly evening air. Then she opened it. Daniel looked like he had aged a year and a day. "Thank you for opening the door," he said. "Do not thank me yet." He nodded. "Fair." He stepped inside only after she moved back. The house felt different with him in it now, not because the furniture had changed but because the silence had. It was no longer the ordinary quiet of two tired people at the end of a day. It was the quiet of a bridge after part of it had fallen. Daniel took an envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "This is not money," he said quickly, seeing her face shift. "It is a list. Every property, every account, every document with your name or my name attached to it. Every lie I told and what it was hiding. I wrote down what I could remember. Margaret is helping collect the rest." Claire did not touch the envelope. "Why?" Because I do not get to decide how much truth you can handle anymore. The answer was simple. That made it harder to push away. Claire walked to the counter and picked up the empty jar. She set it between them. This was not just about money. Daniel looked at the jar. I know. No, I need to say it. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. Every time I put money in here, I was choosing a future. A small one, maybe. Weekend art classes in a storefront with bad plumbing and folding chairs. But it was mine. And every time you invented a crisis, you taught me my dreams had to wait behind yours. Daniel's eyes filled, but he did not interrupt. Claire appreciated that. I can live in a small house, she continued. I can clip coupons. I can eat clearance cake and laugh about it. What I cannot do is live inside a story written by someone else. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we rewrite it only if you want to. Claire studied him. There is no we until there is accountability. I agree. Counseling. Full financial transparency. Separate legal advice for me. Paid from your personal funds, not the company. No public statement using my pain to make you look redeemed. And for now you stay somewhere else. He closed his eyes briefly, accepting every word like he deserved them because he did. Okay. The quiet after that was not soft, but it was clean. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. For one painful second, Claire thought it was the golden key again. It was not. It was the paper napkin from the fundraiser where they had met, carefully folded, worn at the edges. On it was the terrible flower he had drawn that first night. I kept this because that was the first night I wanted to be ordinary for the right reason, he said. Then I turned ordinary into another disguise. Claire took the napkin. The flower was crooked, almost childish, and beneath it he had written her name in blue ink. Something in her chest softened, not enough to forgive, but enough to remember that love had been real before fear poisoned it. She placed the napkin beside the jar. You do not get to come home by being sorry, she said. Daniel nodded, tears bright in his eyes. Then I will learn how to come home by being honest. And when he left that night, Claire did not run after him. She locked the door, leaned her forehead against the wood, and understood that healing was not the moment someone apologized. Healing was the long, steady work of making sure the same wound never had to open twice. 6 months later, the old storefront on Maple Street smelled like fresh paint, sharpened pencils, and coffee from the bakery next door. Morning light poured through the front windows, catching dust in the air and turning it gold. Above the door, hand-painted letters read Claire Bennett Art Studio, not in marble, not in steel, not in the cold language of towers and boardrooms, but in blue paint Claire had mixed herself on a paper plate. The building was not a gift dropped into her lap to make a man feel forgiven. It had been purchased through a transparent trust with her own attorney reviewing every line. The lease, the budget, the program plan, every signature had been hers. Daniel had offered resources. Claire had set the terms. That was how they had started rebuilding, one honest document at a time. On the first Saturday class, folding chairs filled the room, and the tables were covered with watercolor trays, paper cups, and brushes standing upright in mason jars. Retired neighbors came. Single parents came. Teenagers from the library came. A truck driver from Bennett Logistics came with his wife because he said he had not picked up a brush since high school and wanted to remember what quiet felt like. Claire stood near the front, wearing jeans with paint on one knee, her hair pinned back loosely, her old glass money jar on the shelf behind her. It was full now, not with emergency quarters but with notes from students. Thank you. I felt calm today. I made something. Beside it, under a small frame, was the crooked flower Daniel had drawn on the napkin the night they met. She kept it there not because the past was painless, but because healing did not mean pretending the beginning had never mattered. Daniel arrived 10 minutes before class ended, carrying 2 cardboard trays of coffee and a box of donuts from the bakery. He no longer walked into rooms expecting them to make space for him. He paused at the door until Claire saw him, then lifted the box slightly, asking without words if he could come in. She smiled, small but real. That was their language now. Asking, waiting, answering. During those 6 months, Daniel had kept every condition. He had lived in a modest apartment downtown, gone to counseling every Tuesday, opened every account, corrected every legal record, and given one public statement that did not mention Claire except to say she had deserved the truth from the beginning. Margaret had completed the company review. Vivian was removed from negotiations after the leak was traced through her office, and the merger was rewritten with employee protection strong enough that even the drivers talked about it at roadside diners in plain, relieved voices. Daniel returned to Bennett Logistics slowly, not as the man who had hidden behind a false life, but as one learning that leadership without honesty was only another kind of loneliness. That evening, after the last student left and the paint trays were washed, Claire locked the studio door. Daniel stood beside her on the sidewalk under a pink Ohio sunset, hands in his coat pockets, watching the lights come on inside the little storefront. "It looks like you," he said. Claire glanced at him. Messy. Alive. She looked through the window at the room she had once saved quarters for, the dream that had waited quietly while everything else fell apart. Then she reached into her bag and took out a key. It was not gold. It was plain silver, newly cut at the hardware store 3 blocks away. She placed it in Daniel's hand. He stared at it, understanding slowly. "Claire? It is not a promise that everything is fixed," she said. "It is a promise that you can help close up on Thursdays." He laughed softly, but his eyes shone. "I can do Thursdays. And sweep. I can sweep. And never move a jar of paint without asking me where it goes." He put one hand over his heart. "That may be the hardest part, but I will try." She smiled then, the kind that did not erase the wound but proved it no longer owned the room. Later that night, they ate dinner in the same little rented kitchen where the truth had first broken open. Daniel had bought the house from the landlord, but Claire insisted they keep the chipped vase, the old table, and the clock above the stove that still ticked too loudly. There were 2 plates, 2 cloth napkins, and a chocolate cake from the bakery with no clearance sticker this time, though Claire joked that she missed the discount. Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. Both of them looked at it. For a second, the old silence tried to return. Then Daniel turned the screen toward her before touching it. "Margaret Hale." He pressed speaker. "Daniel," Margaret said, warm but brisk. "The board is ready for tomorrow's vote. We can review tonight if needed." Daniel looked at Claire across the candlelight, then at the simple silver key lying beside his plate. "Tomorrow is fine," he said. "Tonight I am having dinner with my wife." Claire reached across the table and took his hand, not because every scar was gone, but because no door stood locked between them anymore. And for the first time in a long time, home was not the house, not the company, not the money, and not the story anyone else believed. Home was the truth sitting at the table, choosing to stay.